I think I've come to see that the biggest problem on the planet is corporate greed. And you see it in the world of, the military, you see it in the world of the ag industry, you see it in the world of the pharmaceutical industry. It's all these big businesses that have so much clout in DC that they can write the laws, and I think that's the piece that I think when the American public really understands that, they're going to reject that model. And this is maybe me being sometimes I call myself an incurable optimist, but if we're going to survive as a race is maybe the more level-headed way to say it. If we're going to survive as a race, we got to get that, and we got to get those guys out of politics, out of running the world and shaping it into something that is really so grotesque. I mean, when corporations are poisoning our children, it's time to get political and get upset,
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Lindley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops grown in healthy soils and organic livestock raised on well-managed pasture, all without toxic chemicals. You just heard from Mark Squire, longtime owner of Good Earth Natural Foods in Marin County, California. With so many food co-ops and independent grocery stores struggling to stay in business as consolidation in the food sector worsens, it's refreshing to hear from someone like Mark, who's been able to maintain his principles as well as allow his grocery store to continue to thrive. Mark and his staff work hard to maintain a trusted place for their customers to find organic food, much of it locally and ethically sourced. Good Earth pushes brands to do better when an organic offering can't be found, and they do their part in educating customers and encouraging them to become organic advocates. We should all be so lucky to have a store like Good Earth in our own neighborhoods, and the hope is that someday we will.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm talking today with Mark Squire. Mark, thank you for taking the time and inviting me to your lovely farm, ranch. I guess we call them ranches out here. You got all kinds of livestock. So I've actually met Mark before. I even wrote a letter about you some time back because I thought that your position in the world of independent retailers was significant. And so let's talk about that. You run Good Earth.
Good Earth Natural Foods.
Natural Foods.
Yeah.
Good Earth Natural Foods. And the first one was in Mill Valley?
No, we were in Fairfax.
Fairfax first.
And our second one was in Mill Valley.
Okay. I've been to the one in Mill Valley.
Yeah.
I haven't been to Fairfax.
Right, that's our newer store.
So, to me, your stores are very impressive because they offer eaters honest choices, genuine choices, so people can decide. And they're extremely porous to the community, meaning lots of local farms find a space on your shelf. And people looking for that know that and can come and find it there. And that's becoming more and more rare as the world keeps changing and turning. When did you start the first store?
Well, it was 1969, and I actually didn't start it, but I wandered in after they had been open a couple months, a little hole in the wall. And I had come from Connecticut. I dropped out of school on my 16th birthday. The Vietnam War was raging, and I wanted to go west. But I think, I really got into natural foods because of my mom, who was she was a student of Adele Davis, who was a old-time nutrition, and
she's still alive, and she's still working on it.
Are you serious?
That's right.
Wow. I had no idea. I
Yeah.
would have never imagined. Cool.
That's right.
Good to know. But so anyway, I came out of those
I take it back.
roots.
I'm thinking of Frances Moore Lepay.
Oh,
So, okay, but
no,
they
Adele
were
Davis
both.
can't be alive.
No, but that was a long time ago that she wrote Diet for a Small Planet, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Adele Davis was the
She's
one who.
She's a whole generation before Frances Moore Lepay, I
All
think.
right. Yeah, my mistake. So she lit
yeah.
you up.
Well, my mom really
lit-
did. I mean, we grew up eating organ meats a lot, was one of her big things.
Yeah.
So, tripe was normal. We even ate brains and kidneys and every part of the animal.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was that Adele Davis taught that that's where the nutrition was in an animal.
Right.
Which I think is still true. Unfortunately, I think we learned later that that's where a lot of the toxins are too, perhaps.
Right.
And of course, this is the 50s, and probably the animal organs weren't as toxic back then as they are today.
I think
I don't
that's
think
right.
I would eat a liver, conventionally grown liver for anything
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
They might be qualify as toxic waste at this point. But
Yeah.
so anyway, those were sort of my roots. But when I left home, I came across the country and was sort of looking for. Well, I had actually worked in a natural food store in Connecticut after school. And it was really there that I started to read the books that were on their shelf. And that was J.I. Rodale, George Osawa, a lot of these sort of early health people. Back to Eden was one of the classics that we read. And
give me a year for other people who maybe weren't alive then. About what year are we talking about that you dropped out of school or that you headed west?
it was 1969.
I'm sorry, you said that 1969 that you dropped out or that you headed west?
That I think early in the year I dropped out. Yeah.
Okay.
And
so you had been working in natural food stores?
Yeah, I mean, we actually called them pill shops back then because there was some food there, but there was mostly it was supplements. And, even the organic food that we, one of the things we did before we hit the road coming across the country is we stocked up on food, organic food. And, most of the products that we were buying were Lima, Belgium. So they were literally being imported organic. They were really lovely, oats that just tasted full of flavor from Belgium. But so there actually wasn't a whole lot of trade in the, you couldn't go into any town and even find organic grains. This was actually after I came to California, I got to know the Lundbergs, and they were really the first rice production in the United States that was organic. And I always tell this story to the Lundberg people when I meet at the show, because at that point the crop of organic rice was sporadic and it would always run out. So I had a relationship with Terry Fowler, who was a distributor, who went up and brought Lundberg rice down for us. And when Terry knew the crop was about to run out, I would sort of buy futures to last me 4 or 5 months sometimes of organic rice. And I didn't really have any place to store it. So I ended up basically piling it up in my bedroom and putting a piece of plywood on top. And that was my bed. So every, once a month or something, I'd take one layer of the bed away and put the plywood down and then take it to the store. That was that's what you did back then. If you wanted organic food, it was, difficult to keep it.
You had to really hunt. You had to figure it out.
Yeah.
My memory of slightly later than that was the early food co-ops, which were not in stores, and they were ordering from Walnut Acres and wherever we could,
right.
and then in somebody's kitchen, we'd cut up the cheese and weigh out and get, onions, and everyone would get a box, because that's what you had to do to get organic food.
Right. I never was involved I mean, many of my friends were, obviously, but when I went into Good Earth, it was sort of one of the first, what I would consider a natural food store.
Yeah.
Food was the focus, and and organic food from day one was the focus. But in those days, there weren't a whole lot of those, even in California. It was, and you had mentioned OHM, which was Organic Merchants, which
Right.
was very early. I think that was probably 10 years later, so that takes us to maybe 1980. And OHM was, a network of organic retailers that were trying to ensure the integrity of the industry. And a lot of times I don't think people really even realize that about organics, is that retailers actually played a very important part in those early days of organic, of the integrity piece. I had a good friend at Rainbow Grocery in San Francisco who I always thought of them as, they're a co-op, but I thought of them as a little bit of a sister store. And Stu Fishman was the produce guy there, and we used to literally, we'd go down to Half Moon Bay and do farm visits. We didn't even call them that at that point, but there was this artichoke grower that was selling organic. He was always at the farmer's market. A lot of people were selling them as organic. And we went down there and just, immediately asked some questions about, well, what do you do about this or that? And it turned out, well, he was soaking the root in, I can't remember the material at this point, but it was definitely a pesticide.
Not good.
Not good. So, and then we would just publish that to the other OHM stores, and everybody would blacklist them. And there were some really wild things. There was a produce distributor out of LA named Max Kozak, who later got busted, and it turned out he was literally buying conventional broccoli, taking it out of the box, putting it in a banana box, and then shipping it off as organic broccoli. And so it was the way that we, early on, in fact, it was really sort of the retailers doing that was kind of the beginning of certification, in a way, in that we all realized how important integrity was to, the consumer was looking for an honest story, and they didn't want to get burned. And so we as a group kind of took that on as like, hey, let's do what we can to protect it. And in fact, through that, later came, both Stuart and I were both part of California Certified Organic Farmers. So I started, it was really in Sonoma County here that, it's Sonoma, and then there were two chapters, Sonoma County, and then there was one down in Santa Cruz. And I ended up just going to a CCOF meeting and, thinking, well, I'm a retailer, I don't know if I'm going to be accepted in this group, but they immediately sort of embraced me as like, oh, here's a guy that, is connected with consumers, we can pick his brain. And, anyway, I was welcomed, and ended up being on the board of CCOF for 5 or 6 years there as well. But, and I think, I'm a real advocate for the organic label. And some of it is that it gets a bad rap these days, and I sort of understand it. I'm a critical of things that go wrong in organics myself a lot, but at the same time, I think that especially young people don't realize how much effort was put into making that label be what it was, and it has some real advantages in the marketplace. It helps the consumer to be connected to a method of agriculture that they want to support, and it has the built-in law behind it, so that if somebody abuses it, you can take them to court. And there have been people that have done jail time now based on some of that fraudulent activities. And so that's a really important baseline, I think, for our whole community to know that exists. And appreciate what the Real Organic Project is doing, is to try and, increase the awareness of what soil health really means and all those things. But, at the same time, I think that soil health was, back in the days of CCOF, the early days, it was all, Paul Mueller was there, and, it was the people with huge integrity that really were making it all happen and influencing those standards. And, we spent huge amounts of time sitting around tables just sort of deciding, well, how many years does a strawberry start need to be in an organic program before you can call it organic, the berries, and, that kind of detail that people, I don't think, realize how much detail there was to sort of work out. And it was all done within those certification groups before USDA even got in the picture. Yeah. I always like to tell this story that it was those growers who had huge integrity, about soil health. They were all in it because they believed in it. None of them. It was so tough back then to make it happen. None of them were there because they wanted to make more money, I guarantee you. But it was within those groups of devoted organic farmers that the debate emerged, and it mostly emerged around the idea of how long does an organic farm have to be organic before you can sell the products as organic. So it was the entry period was widely debated, and at that point there were some certifiers that were kind of going, it should be a year. Others were saying 3 years. I think there was even some people that were saying it should be 5 years. And of course there was no data to look at about pesticide residue breakdown or whatever. And, but the little data that there was sort of showed it was like all over the charts. It depended on soil conditions, climatic conditions, what the pesticide was. There's just an awful lot there. So there was really kind of no way you could say, well, this is scientifically where the line should be.
And there was no precedent. It's like everyone was inventing this, making, blazing trails, not following trails. Right. It's like, okay, well, what does organic mean to us? And we would discuss it and we would argue about it. It was all, that was good. Of course, there wouldn't be agreement. Do you think?
Yeah. But let me just finish that story. But I was, and as a retailer, I was a little bit of the fly on the wall in that conversation because I wasn't having to deal with the time period. It didn't influence me economically at all, whereas these guys, it did. And I felt really sort of humbled and proud in a way that some of those organic farmers that were they had the most integrity, the argument that they brought to the table was, we don't want to make the standards so rigid that California organic farmers, California farmers can't transition to organics. Because if we had made the cutoff 5 years, it would have been a real niche market that remained. And so the 3 years became a compromise position, but a consciously made compromise. That's kind of, what I wanted to.
Yeah. I actually, I'm fine with the 3-year transition. For me, the issue, I could live with a 1-year transition. For me, the real issue is, are we moving America's agriculture to real organic?
Yeah.
So if somebody said, well, something bad happened here 2 years ago, but that will never happen again, and we're going to really be invested in a whole kind of agriculture based on the life in the soil.
Right.
I'm like, good, bring it on.
It's always going to be a compromise.
It's always going to be a
compromise. Because there's, I talk to consumers all the time that can't believe, that, pesticides are used in organic and they are sulfur dust or whatever, but, they are pesticides. They're not anything like the ones that the conventional guys are using, but they're toxins, and some consumers can't, they can't even get their head around that. Yeah. But what I say to them is, well, do you want to have stone fruits at $3 a pound, or do you want to be paying $10 a pound? And I think sometimes there are those trade-offs inevitably, but
Yeah. If we step away from the borderline, the choices are very simple. The closer we get to the boundary of what the standard is, it gets complicated.
Yeah.
No doubt.
yeah.
No doubt.
And as an industry, I think sometimes we don't bring a whole lot of logic to those things too. I wish we did more. Like, we were talking earlier about the plastic mulch thing. And
Yeah.
to me, I think, I don't know if you saw that there was just an article, somebody forwarded it to me, I could send it to you, but basically about these forever chemicals that are being found on organic farms more than in conventional farms.
What are they from?
Well, I think the only, again, it's one of these sort of tip of the iceberg things where we need to do a lot more research. But the only thing me and my friends that were talking about it could guess was that maybe it was about plastic mulch, and which is probably used more in organic systems than conventional, but maybe not.
I don't know.
Maybe not.
I don't know any conventional farmers who aren't using plastic mulch. I just don't. For vegetables.
That aren't. Yeah.
Of course, dairy field, grains, totally different, but everybody is using it. I know some organic people who won't. I wonder, are we talking about like PFAS?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I suspect that the reason it's showing up on organic farms is they're the ones who are testing.
Well, this was an independent thing. I'll send you the article.
Yeah.
And, in this day and age, you don't know whether the article originated in Monsanto's,
Right.
offices, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's the world we live in. But it did sound like there was some credibility there.
It's interesting. It really kind of, in the Northeast, I really was aware of it first in Maine. And the first farmer who became very famous for this, it wasn't anything they had done. It was already in the soil before they bought the farm.
Oh, yeah.
It was from the 50s that the PFAS had been left there in some kind of a sludge residue, something, and he had no idea of it. They had no idea when they bought the farm.
Yeah. Well, we live in a messy world.
It is.
It's and again, I think you sort of said it there, but I think organic is it's really about healing things, right? It's not about being perfect.
Right. Right. I know when they started the organic movement, as a political movement, which would have been in England and Europe, and it came to America. Of course, the farming really came from India. I mean, that's where Howard learned a lot of what he ended up teaching. He's like, oh my goodness, these people that I was sent to teach how to farm are teaching me how to farm. But as a political movement, it happened in Europe because it was really in opposition to the chemical usage that was becoming dominant in the agriculture at the time. And I know that they had conversations about whether they could have standards and certification. There was a lot of doubt about it. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's always an imperfect solution, but without it, it's not good. That's what we see at the moment with regenerative. There are many great people who claim to be regenerative, but they're also Syngenta.
Right.
And they embrace regenerative. They have these huge websites about their regenerative practices, and down in the bottom, the last paragraph is that, of course, we can permit some chemicals to be used as well.
Well, that's what happens when you have a label that has no legal meaning.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and it'd be nice. It would be really nice if we could somehow establish a higher label, than organic, that had a legal meaning. But honestly, I think even protecting the label that we have now is a huge challenge moving forward. And I am very tied into the genetically engineered advance of the food system, or fighting against it at least, because I'm continually shocked at how much money there is in that industry, and how sweet the PR is around it, and that industry. Like I go to the natural food show, and they're showing up in the natural food world with these GMO yeast products, dairy proteins, meat proteins, and and talking to those guys, you can really see that what they really want to do is they want to get into the organic market. Yeah. And the amount of money they've got behind them is huge, and they're talking in Vilsack's ear constantly.
Yeah.
And so that to me is my biggest worry, and I think that we, as an industry, we all need to be ready for when, Secretary of Agriculture tries to get that passed into organics. We're all ready to scream bloody murder, because they will do it. And
yeah.
I know, it even slips out when you listen to them talking sometimes. It'll slip out as like, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could have GMOs and organics? Or
they always slip it out. It's clearly a quiet campaign that's going on to bring in, CRISPR and all those technologies.
Yeah.
So let me ask you to go back for a minute. So you have the Good Earth has really been successful. Would you say so? Are you?
No, I consider us as being successful. Yes.
Yeah, and you've done that at a time where most stores that have some similarities to you have actually dropped by the wayside. And there is a constant winnowing in the marketplace that shakes out small independent stores in favor of chains, which are then consumed by larger chains, which are then consumed by still larger chains. Right. So we're getting to a place of consolidation in where people can buy food in America, of actually having very few choices. I mean, you go into the stores and it looks like, oh my goodness, there's so many choices. But many of the 1,100 farms that are certified with real organic are actually losing those shelf spaces. Not at your store, but at most stores, at many stores. What are the main chains in Northern California? I don't know.
Yeah, well, Safeway dominates, and we do have some other. Rayleigh's is big,
and of course Whole Foods.
Whole Foods, yes.
Yeah.
We call them Amazon.
Amazon. Yeah. I have a story to tell about Whole Foods, but we'll get to that. Why do you think that you have continued to succeed? Are you just an extremely adept business person?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I do have to qualify things by saying that we're in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is, the world of progressives. And so I think we've got a good audience, and we're also in a fairly affluent area. So those things make it easier to push ahead. But that said, I think that a lot of our success is attributed to the fact that we have constantly devoted energy to educating the community about organic issues. So it's been, me talking at Green Day events, us hosting movies in San Rafael about the secret ingredients, or, so it's been pretty constant that we've been, because we felt like that was our, that's what our responsibility was, to be good grocers, is to help the community to understand food issues. And and that also is internal. My hope is you always, if you go in a Good Earth and ask a, hard question about organics, you'll get a really straight answer. And and that, I think, is coupled with, like you say, we've sort of encouraged small farmers. And, when people have the information about, why small farmers do a better job, they want to support them, but it's the information that I think is frequently lacking. So so we took that. We've always taken that on and tried to. Some of it is if you go in and the gentleman that's putting up apple displays at Good Earth, you should if you ask him some question, like one of the big things that's being discussed right now is about this appeal stuff, and if you ask a real detailed question about something in the world of organics, you'll actually get an answer from them. And from that, I think people started to understand that we were actually a source of information, and they appreciated that a lot, and wanted to support that kind of transparency. So I think that's been a lot of our success. And you could sort of say the same thing about farmers too, is that they're getting bought out and stuff like that. But to me, it's more, maybe the question should be, how do we inspire young people to go into business? And I still look out there at the world, and I see the world of organic food is a huge business opportunity for people that are committed, and they should, people should open stores, and there are enough of us out there that care about these issues that you will get support. I think, in fact, I'd say more so than it used to be. When we started out, it was like, I remember, some people would come in and say, organic, what's that? It's like, but.
Right. We don't have that almost hostile reaction that we had when we started back in the day. And
yeah,
I remember well enough. But I'd have to say, if a young person came to me and said, what do you think? I'm going to do this. I'm going to start a retail operation for organic. I'd go, be careful, my friend. Because the truth is, you're now competing with Walmart. You're not just competing with Good Earth. You're not even just competing with Whole Foods. Walmart is the biggest vendor of organic food in America.
Right.
Certified organic.
Right. Yeah.
And as with farmers, I see these programs coming from the USDA to encourage young people to become organic farmers. Well, wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. But I also see very established, very capitalized, very skilled organic farmers going out of business.
Right.
And I go, there's something wrong with the picture if you think you're going to encourage these young people who really don't have the skill set or the financial backing, they don't have a farm, to go in and succeed, where these people who've been doing it for 20 years are literally failing. I think that we need to change the marketplace. To do that, we need to get the USDA to actually do their job and follow the law.
Yeah.
And enforce the law, and if they would do that, Real Organic Project could happily go away,
Right.
and happily go away, and not do this again.
Yeah.
So to do that, I've been convinced, having tried this for some years now, that the path of regulatory reform is simply not going to work. We don't have the power. And we're going to have to do a lot more of that education you're talking about.
Yeah.
We have to build a movement.
Absolutely.
And to do that, we have to explain to people, wait, it isn't quite the way it looks, which you're doing.
Yeah.
Which is why you're succeeding. Yeah. Now you've got the benefit of already being trusted and already being established. So it's wonderful, and you're building on that.
And I guess in all honesty, I do have to say that, the first, I would even say the first 10 years of Good Earth was, there were some times when I remember, my worst week was when I think I bounced a whole bunch of paychecks on my staff. And it was like, in that moment, I said, I'm never going to be back here again. I'm going to do whatever it takes to avoid that. But so there were some rough patches.
Yeah.
But business is that way, and I think, I don't know. I guess I would still encourage young people to get involved in the natural food world. I mean, you can start
Yes.
small and learn. You learn, but Good Earth is part of the INFRA, Independent Natural Food Retailers Association, and we're connected with a lot of small retailers around the country, and so they're out there. There are people that are working every day hard to do it.
Yeah.
I've been very vocal in INFRA, partly because I also think one of the edges that Good Earth has is that we're really committed to organic. So USDA organic is like our baseline. And customers, sometimes they don't even necessarily realize it when they walk in the door, but like I see people occasionally, buying sandwiches at our deli or whatever, and they go, "Oh, this is all organic, huh?" And it's so it sinks in like, "Oh, okay, these guys really mean what they're doing. They mean it." And when people come to that realization, they literally become customers for life. And we've in the early days, I remember, we used to have people that would. There's one person that lived way up in northern Sonoma County, so she'd drive down 2 hours to do her weekly shop with us because she realized, oh, I can buy organic here, and they do some, making sure that it really is, and I can trust that. So, there is that devotion that comes with the commitment, and I think a lot of retailers don't get that piece of it. But of course, it has to come with the education too. You can't just be all organic and leave it at that. But I can't tell you how many times at Good Earth, like a good example is there's this brand of chips that are called Hava, and they're very tasty. But when you look at them, they've got an ohm sign on them, so they sort of are cool or something. But they're not organic, so what that probably means is GMO corn and GMO oil and pesticides, etc. But this goes back now 25 years for us, but they were our top selling chip, and because we couldn't buy there weren't hardly any organic chips out there. But at a certain point, there were enough organic choices in the chip aisle that we said, why are we selling those guys? And so we discontinued them. And it was interesting to watch this was probably our number 2 seller in the whole store, right? So before we did it, we educated our entire staff, like, okay, what are we going to do when people come in the door and say, what did you do with my Hava chips? We just basically told them a story. We don't feel like we can, in good conscience, sell these to you anymore. And, a lot of people were kind of going like, oh my God, these guys are crazy. They're going to go out of business. But it was actually the absolute opposite that happened. Over and over again, moms would come in and say, oh, really? Wow, thank you for taking good care of us. And that's why I shop here, it almost brings tears to my mind because I remember those faces. But when you understand what the pesticides on that stuff is doing to your kid, it doesn't, you'll drive halfway across the country to get the good stuff, and that's where the education has to be, right? And there's a huge following if the education comes with it.
Yeah, that's right. I agree. That's what we have to do. And if I were running a small store, that is absolutely what I would do, because I think it's also your competitive advantage over any chain.
Right.
You care. So I've quoted this a number of times, but I'll quote it again. I interviewed Michael Pollan, and I asked him, Michael, are things getting better in the food system, or are they getting worse? Because I was genuinely confused about it. And he said, and I probably misquote him, but I'll do my best. He said, in terms of people's understanding of the food system, in terms of people's excitement about alternatives to the food system, it's just getting better. And we see this tremendous growth in enthusiasm and in excitement and learning. He said, I've got students, he was teaching at Harvard that term, I've got students who are riveted by this. And in fact, one of those students came to work on my farm. It was fun. But in terms of the realities of the food system, it's getting worse.
Yeah.
And we're using more herbicides. Everything is becoming more consolidated, and that means that they have more political power and the result is less choice. It's too much bother to buy it locally. They're going to find, because they're national in scope, they're going to find suppliers who can supply them nationally.
Right.
So I'm curious, I hear that in this, I don't like to use the word privilege because it has a judgmental connotation. I think it is privileged in the sense of what a privilege to live in a place where
everybody should be lived in a
everyone should
place,
live in
right?
a place
that's
where
what we need to
where
create.
they can afford the food,
Right.
and they're offered choices. But what do you think? Do you as a retailer, are you aware of the pressures of consolidation coming down the pike in retail and in distribution?
Right. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think yes, but I think I would say that those pressures have always been there, in coming and going. Like I always remember, for a while I actually got a little bit involved in the world of certification. I worked for OCIA with their international certification part-time when Good Earth was small, and I was looking for something else to do a couple of days a week. But and in that I learned a whole lot about the grain trade in North America, and it was really interesting to hear these grain farmers talk about how, the Cargills of the world would come into a community, open up a grain elevator, and offer the farmers, 10-15% more for their grain, than the old elevator. And as soon as the old elevator went out of business, the price of grain dropped 10% below market to these guys.
A classic technique of monopolies.
That's why I call it like hardball business, American business. It's sort of, it's almost to me like, where, American business has this tolerance for being abusive and cutthroat, and I think that's always been with us in the world of business too. So, and that's, I think, but customers want to understand that too. We've just, this whole thing just came down with a big kombucha brand where it was discovered that they were basically violating a whole lot of labor laws, and customers really care about that stuff. So our response was we actually discontinued them, but partly based on the fact that we knew we had the support of our customers to do that, because they care, and people do care. So again, it kind of comes, even those social issues come back to awareness and education, I think, and to some extent.
Yeah, and being local. I've talked before about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. It was a famous fire in New York City, and a lot of people died because the conditions were terrible. They couldn't get out. The doors were locked. They were jumping out of the windows.
Right, yeah.
And it became a pivotal moment in American labor history and American worker safety. And it was really, OSHA was born that day.
Yeah.
And really the labor movement, it wasn't born, but that was the day that it moved to a whole different level.
Yeah.
Because people in New York City were walking along and seeing bodies lined up on the street.
Yeah.
Well, there's still bodies lined up on the street. They're just far, far away.
Yeah, right.
It's just as dangerous. They just exported the danger
Right.
to some place where people don't look like most Americans
Right.
and don't have a voice to most Americans, but the products are still coming here. We're
Right.
wearing them.
Right. Right.
You know, cheap food, cheap clothing.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that that's storytelling, but that's also proximity. When things happen far away, out of sight, that's right. Vegetables and berries are moving to Mexico, and that's because they pay people much less there,
Right.
and that means that the price goes down here, which means that the domestic producers in California, they're paying $15 and a half, $16 an hour
Right.
as a minimum wage, can't compete.
Right.
So,
See, but don't you think the answer to that is worldwide social justice? You know, it's not putting up a barrier, I don't think, but I absolutely do. You know, I always think about, like, you know, back when I was a kid, it was like, you know, the yogis were coming from India, and there was all this, like, we are all one. Remember, we are all one. And it's, to me, it's like, as I've gotten older, I think I've realized that there's a real truth about that. That's not at all airy-fairy. You know, we are all one, and you can't, you know, screw over, you know, people in a third world country without it affecting us too. You know, so we're all one community, even. And so I think that I actually think that you know, one of the real problems in America is the ignorance of worldwide politics. And you know, even, you know, I almost can't talk about social justice issues without talking about the U.S. military budget. It's you know, it's obscene, and I think a lot of the reason for it is to protect those economic interests. You know, so that the people in third world countries or southern hemisphere countries or whatever don't get too uppity about wanting their labor rights, right? It's we can put a dictator in place that's going to keep everybody down, and we support that. You know, our tax dollars support that. And so, you know, I think we gotta think about, you know, organics and social justice issues on a worldwide level, and you know, do something about the tax bill, which, you know, to me, it's like when half your federal dollars go to a military budget, there's a huge problem.
yeah.
And there's no way we're gonna, you know, have the society where everybody has as much organic food as they want to eat, et cetera, without shutting that mechanism down. It's this, you know, corporate greed.
Yeah.
And you know, I think I've come to see that the biggest problem on the planet is corporate greed, and you see it in the world of, you know, the military. You see it in the world of the ag industry. You know, you see it in the world of the pharmaceutical industry. It's all these big businesses that have so much clout in DC that they can write the laws, and I think that's the piece that I think when the American public really understands that, they're going to reject that model. And you know, this is maybe me being sometimes I call myself an incurable optimist, but, you know, if we're going to survive as a race is maybe the more level-headed way to say it. If we're going to survive as a race, we got to get that, and we got to, you know, get those guys out of politics, you know, out of running the world and shaping it into something that is really so grotesque. I mean, you know, when corporations are poisoning our children, you know, it's time to get political and get upset, you know, and I think people are doing that. And that's what maybe Michael Pollan is speaking of, the consciousness that's increasing. And maybe it hasn't enough to get people really out on the street.
Right.
But
we have to take it to action, you know,
Yeah.
but the understanding is growing. You know,
Yeah.
people are confused about what to do about it. And I'm confused too.
Yeah.
You know, this is not obvious. It's not easy. We have done it before. I mean, it was a historic moment when we broke up Standard Oil. That was same thing, a hugely powerful company,
Yeah.
bigger than anything we've got.
Yeah.
And you know, we had antitrust laws that worked, and we acted on them, we enforced them.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. So I don't think it's naive to
Well, we
think
could
that
get
we
that.
might do that.
Yeah, yeah. No,
We've done
we
it.
got to, though. That's the way I look at it. Is if we don't, we're screwed, you know, is the reality. But anyway,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Yeah,
But,
we'll see what happens.
But I'm also a real believer in being political. You know, I've always, you know, I felt lucky to kind of come from a, you know, dinner time at my, when I was growing up was always debating politics. And, but I do think it's really important that, you know, people that believe in organic lifestyle are, you know, meeting their representatives, going in there and saying, you know, poisoning my kids with glyphosate is not okay. Please do something about it, you know. And, you know, because they need to hear that, you know, frequently when I've talked to legislators about those issues, they kind of go like, oh God, nobody's ever said that to me. I mean, that's changing too, but they need to hear from us.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I agree. Yeah, we need to figure out how to do it together because it's so much more powerful when we don't just speak as one voice. That's where we have to start always, one person at a time. But after a while, it becomes a chorus, and then we can bring some real music to it.
Yeah.
Before we go, I wanted to just tell you a story. Last time I came to Mill Valley, I went to Good Earth last year in August, beginning of August. And before that, I went to Whole Foods in Mill Valley. And it was the height of the local tomato season. And the Whole Foods did not have a single local organic tomato in Mill Valley.
Mm.
And of course, Good Earth did. And I thought, how can this be in, as you say, a very privileged clientele of people who are highly educated, have a relatively large disposable income, are willing to pay for good food. They understand about health. They understand that what you eat matters. And I went in there, and the only certified organic food was a hydroponic tomato from Mexico. And I thought, how can this be?
Wow. Yeah, yeah.
I just visited Full Belly and Scott Park and Jim Durst and all of these excellent tomato growers, and only your store was selling their stuff.
Well, you know, businesses are, you know, very conscious of customer opinion too. So I would say, like, you know, if I heard that from, you know, somebody that lived around here, I'd say, well, you should be in their face and say, where are our local tomatoes, you guys? Come on, get on it. But of course, when a company gets so big, it becomes maybe the person that needs to hear that message is in Chicago or something, and it gets harder, which speaks to why smaller businesses are a lot of times, you know, more available and grounded. But
I'm finding that the people in Whole Foods don't even know who to talk to. They don't know who's making those decisions. It's so remote now.
Yeah. Well, I even defend Whole Foods though sometimes. You know, if I'm traveling, you know, sometimes, you know, I can buy organic food in there, and that's, you know, when you look back at, you know, when you go back to the 70s and 80s there, where it was like, I mean, we literally would look at a map and say, oh, the next natural food store is, you know, 400 miles that way. Let's detour and, you know, stock up a little bit, you know. So, you know, it's and, you know, if you compare Whole Foods to Safeway, it's like, we need to push the envelope on every level.
And trust me, Whole Foods is a big customer of mine.
Yeah.
And Safeway is not. Walmart is not. You know, all the chains which have consolidated are not interested in buying anything local, honestly. Yeah. They've just left. Whole Foods still will. Of course, it's you know, the pain of your child who has gone so far astray, but still, it is, for a chain, it's the best chain out there.
Right.
But, and I agree that we need to celebrate the victory that you can go. One friend of mine, a farmer from Georgia, said that she's so thrilled because, you know, there's actually she was talking about Walmart. She said, I can go in there and they've got all this organic food now. Now, it's all industrial organic.
Right.
You know, it's grown on very big farms, and because they need to ship it to every Walmart in America.
Yeah, but see, wouldn't it be great if the norm was that, you know, industrial agriculture, organic everywhere, and that was the floor?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's, you know, that's not that big of a stretch. You know, sometimes, you know, I hear people kind of be sort of negative about, well, you know, organic food is really not growing that much, and why is it only, you know, 5% of the thing? But it's I think that things grow logarithmically. Is that the word? Logarithmic.
Logarithmically.
Anyway, yeah, so sometimes it takes, I think of it as like maybe the industry took a number of years to sort of get the snowball going.
Yes.
And now we're at the point where it's going to really start rolling down the hill. And the last thing we want to do is to stop it, right?
Right.
And because it should be the norm. I
Yes.
mean, that's, you know, every mother cares about their kid. And, you know, they're just brainwashed by the corporate PR BS that's out there. And that's why they're not hearing the truth about it. And but we can break through, you know, and I, you know, I'm optimistic that the snowball's rolling.
All right. I'm working on my radical optimism also, Mark. It's my new new resolution is that I'm going to be dramatically optimistic, because I think we actually need the optimism to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, let's say we will get there, and then let's figure out how.
And I'm also lately I've been, as things get, you know, I mean, it's the global warming thing that, you know, it's bleak news. It's really bleak news. And so honestly, I've a little bit shifted to, you know, I do try and embrace the radical optimism, but at the same time, there's also well, if we're going down, let's go down fighting is the other thing. And, you know, to me, that's another good battle cry or whatever.
All right. Mark Squire, what a great place to end. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. Our movement is growing because you're subscribing and sharing these podcasts with your friends. So keep it up and leave us a rating and a review as well so that others can find us. You can find a video version of this interview on our newly designed website, realorganicproject.org, or on our YouTube channel. And you can join us every Thursday for a new episode featuring voices from the organic movement. See you next time.